Okay, so I think we'll kick off now that we've got some a good number of people here. So welcome to the Centre for History at the University of Highland and Islands event for postgraduate taught courses. I'll tell you a little bit more about those in a second. I'm Dr. Louisa Taylor, and I'm the co-program leader for the postgraduate taught courses. So those of you who are coming to study with us, you'll get to know me very well. And for those of you who are thinking about studying with us, hopefully I'll be able to get to know you better in the future. I'm joined by the head of the Centre for History, David Worthington, who is going to kick off the event with a little bit of an overview of the Centre for History that we're also pleased to be working in. So I'll hand over to you, David.
Many thanks, Louisa, and thanks everybody for joining us. You're quite a mixture of people today, so it's a real privilege to be able to talk to you all. And I wanted to start by, I was just reflecting the other day on some of the events that the Centre for History has been involved in beyond the university. So I was looking at some data, because I have to gather data, on 2022-23, so the last academic year. I'm thinking about TV, radio, media, podcasts, talks, things like that, all sorts of things we're engaged in. And we were involved in 63 such events or activities in 22-23. That's over one a week. So we're very committed to doing things beyond the university. And we might debate what we call that. That's public history in some people's eyes, or community history might be another term we would think about in that context. And what I mean by that is the way that we collaborate with bodies beyond the university. That could be museums or heritage bodies or all sorts of people working in the field and considering the past, as many of us do in different ways. Now, for students, this means there are a lot of volunteering opportunities, chances for you to meet experts in those heritage and museum sectors via our courses and programs. And that's all about enhancing your research skills as well. I was just thinking of one example the other day, a master's student of ours who got involved in a project we've had a bit of connection with, which is the Inverness Castle project. So this is a project that's creating a visitor attraction and museum in Inverness, the capital of the Highlands. Whether you agree with that or not, but it basically is the capital of the Highlands. And she said this: it's given me the opportunity to put into practice the skills I had learned during my study on the MLit history of the Highlands and to develop them further. It's given me the chance to reflect on how the history of the Highlands and Islands can be curated to the benefit of all. This is already reflecting back into my studies. So I was delighted to read that kind of stuff. Okay, so very briefly about who we are. We're at the Centre for History. We were founded in 2005, so I suppose that makes us 18 and a bit years old. We produce world-leading research. I don't want to undersell what we do. I manage a fantastic team of 14 permanent staff, and our research is the backbone in many ways of what we do. And actually that percentage of world-leading research in terms of the research and publications we produce has grown over the last 7 to 8 years quite significantly. We've been teaching online master's programs for 13 years now, so we're quite used to it. Hopefully we're not dyed in the wool completely, but we are quite used to it, and we've adapted our way of doing that a lot over the years. And I would just say one measure of that is that in 2023, in the Postgraduate Taught Experience Survey for the whole of the UK, the history area in UHI received 100% for overall satisfaction. So we were really pleased about that. I think a few other points I'd like to make before I pass on relate to pathways. What do I mean by that? Well, masters at UHI, doing a master's at the Centre for History in UHI can be a pathway from undergraduate study into postgraduate research. It can be a pathway into employment. It can be a pathway between one university and another. And we have students who come from other universities to do the masters with us, others who continue their pathway within UHI. And I just thought I'd mention one interesting example of that. A student, you won't mind me mentioning his name, called Graham Hannaford. And Graham Hannaford studied the masters with us. He was part of our first cohort in 2011. He did it part-time from Australia. And he spent 4 years doing the degree with us. and thoroughly enjoyed it, so much that he went on to do a PhD at a university in Australia. But such is technology today that a colleague of mine, Dr. Elizabeth Ritchie, was able to be on the supervisory team. And not only that, but Graham has been a kind of ambassador for us. I was looking the other day, he attended 3 years in a row the Canberra Highland gathering and handed out leaflets for us. Now, I'm not putting any pressure on you to do that kind of work for us, but it's wonderful what he does. So he continues to be in touch with us, and Graham visits us, and we're really proud of that. I'm really keen for master's students and graduates to be part of our Centre for History community. A couple of other points that you might want to know about masters is we're keen to get master's students involved in our activity as a way of building your skills and your employability and your experience, of course, but it also helps us. So one area where that has been really useful is conferences. So in the past, we've had conferences here in the Highlands, also online, and we've given students opportunities to volunteer at those. We've also given them significantly discounted rates, and it's been great in many cases to bring students together both in person and online to attend those conferences. A really wonderful opportunity. So I mentioned something about graduates, and we keep in touch with them. We do have a Centre for History Facebook group, which is a bit clunky, but it's really, really good because there are, I'd say, 20 to 30 graduates of ours who contribute regularly to that, and we can easily pass on the information for that. I'm fully aware that younger people don't really use Facebook, don't worry. Yeah, and many of our master's graduates go on to careers in teaching, in heritage, and that kind of sector. I was speaking to a current student who's an employee, again, in Inverness, actually, of Inverness Museum, and he's found the experience of doing the Masters with us is really enhancing his career and his employment there. Right, I only have a couple more points I would like to raise. We have one current Masters student and one graduate here today, and hopefully you'll get a chance to speak to them, because I think that will probably be better than speaking to me and asking me questions. Really good to hear from students who've gone through the process of studying with us. And they pointed out two areas which they thought would have been really useful to know before starting studies with us, and that we as staff hadn't quite thought of. And the two areas are the discussion board, maybe a term you've heard, and the second area is about the nature of the cohort, the other students on the programme. So the discussion board is really important as a way for us of debating and discussing the ideas we come up with during the classes. It's rather different, as you'd expect, from a social media discussion site, thankfully, in many ways. It's about critical debate, it's about respectful discussion around the topics, but also really detailed, complex discussion of the topics we're raising in the class. And that kind of communication is really vital because many of our students are still studying, some locally, some from other parts of the world. In fact, we've had students in Canada and Australia, so it does become a bit of a challenge getting people together because of time zones. So the discussion board is really key to that. And I just encourage you to feel confident and post there. It's not all about, oh, how erudite I can be. It's about asking questions, engaging with staff, and just reflecting on your process as a learner. So just if I can give you a word of encouragement to do that, that would be great. And I think it'd be great to hear from some of the former students about that. I've already alluded to the global nature of the cohort, and that's been a joy for us, having students in Canada, Australia, Kenya, China, all sorts of countries who brought so much to it and enriched the whole programme for us. But many of our students are also here in the Highlands and Islands. The Centre for History is based in Dornoch, which is a small town in the North Highlands, and we're very proud of that. It's in Sutherland, which is a place with its own population challenges, but that's part of the mission of UHI to be working in these locations and supporting community and cultural life and heritage in these places. I was going to talk more about things like libraries, referencing, what does AI mean for us, but I might take a year if I get onto all of that. We could talk about the time commitment for your studies, about interdisciplinary approaches on some of the programs, but I'm going to leave it to you to tell us what you want to hear about. And just to say, you're massively welcome to your studies here, and it's an absolute delight for those of you who are starting with us this semester, absolute delight to have you here. And for those of you who are considering studying with us, please do ask questions. We'd be delighted to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. So that's just a sort of whistle tour of some of the things you can look forward to as a student with us, whether you're starting with us or considering coming to study with us. So as David said, we're really excited to have a current student and a former student with us today, Alexander Ryland and Teresa Mackey, and we'll come on in a second to a bit of a Q&A with them so that they can share their experiences of studying here with you, so that hopefully that'll get you thinking about the kind of ways in which we teach, and also get excited about some of the modules that we offer and some of the research that we're doing here that, as David said, we potentially could be, you could become involved in, as many of our former students have. Before that, though, I just want to do a quick overview of our degree schemes, just to make sure that everyone's really clear on the kind of degree schemes that we offer, and what they are composed of. So I'm going to start firstly with our MLit in history, which is, you know, understandably one of a very popular scheme, because it offers the greatest flexibility to choose modules from within our department. So it has 2 core modules, and these are essentially research methodology modules. So because you're stepping up into master's level, you need, you know, this essentially gives you those extra skills to produce really excellent independent research. And at this level, it's all about producing excellent independent research that is evidence-based, and full of your wonderful arguments in relation to that evidence. So the MLit history gives you this flexibility around the option modules. It starts with these 2 core modules, arguments and alternatives in history and primary sources in history, and as the name sort of suggests, they give you those foundational skills to build on in the rest of your master's degrees. You then choose a further research training module depending on your particular kind of interest and the kind of research you want to conduct in your dissertation. So you can choose either unlocking languages and paleography for historians, if you're particularly interested in language study, looking at manuscripts and so on. Or you can choose voices from the past, understanding and using oral history, if you would particularly like to explore where oral history methodology might take you. So you can see here how a master's degree essentially sets you up with all this training in order to then undertake this independent research project. You also get to take 3 option modules. And these are a broad range of different kinds of history and different periods of history related to the research of the people who are within the Centre for History. So examples include royal power, propaganda and performance in early modern Europe, one that I'm involved in, talking about the absolutist monarch Frederick III of Denmark, who I would contend is the best but most forgotten about absolute monarch in Europe. We have Renaissance Venice, Lagoon City and Empire, so looking at an area of history that you might not before have thought about studying. And then also, obviously, we have a full suite of Highlands and Islands and Scottish focused modules, including Global Scots Reimagining the Nation. So that's the sort of basic outline of the MLit in history. But we also have 3 other degree schemes, which you might choose to do if you wish to focus in on a very particular aspect of historical study, or if you want to take a little bit more of an interdisciplinary perspective. So we have the MLit history of the Highlands and Islands, very popular, and obviously we are a specialist research centre for research into the Highlands and Islands. So it follows a similar structure to the MLit, but your optional modules and your dissertation will be related to the theme of Highlands and Islands history. So we have option modules like, for example, gender and family in the Highlands from 1700 to 1900. So that's perhaps if you're really interested in that, taking that particular kind of focus on your within your historical studies. We then have MLit history and archaeology of the Highlands and Islands. So this is for anyone who's really interested in taking a slightly interdisciplinary perspective on historical studies. So drawing together historical techniques and archaeological ones to create a slightly different kind of independent research project at the end of your studies. Unsurprisingly, the core of this then is 1 historical module, so primary sources, and one archaeological module, so archaeology of the Highlands and Islands. So you get the benefit of both of studying in both of those departments with specialists in those areas. You will take 2 option modules in Highlands and Islands history and 2 option modules in archaeology. Options you can take include, for example, Vikings and Norse in the North Atlantic, something that myself as a Scandinavian scholar or a scholar of Scandinavia would be one I would probably be picking. So archaeology has a range of option modules for you to choose, and then you also get the benefit of studying with us as well. For the MLit, the final masters we have is even more interdisciplinary. So we take on 3 disciplinary subjects in the MLit in coastal and maritime studies and cultures. So a really innovative interdisciplinary masters, which allows you to explore not only history, but also see how history can work alongside archaeology, but also northern studies and literature and language. So within this, you study a balance across all 3 disciplines. So there's 3 core modules, one in each department. Rivers, Ports and Coasts in European History is hosted by us. Archaeology of the Highlands and Islands by the Archaeology Department, and From Atlantis to Utopia, the Nature of Islandness, centred in the Northern Studies Department. You then choose 3 option modules, 1 from each department. Again, so the interdisciplinary aspect continues. And finally, you culminate, as with all of these dissertations, all of these degree schemes in the dissertation, which is very much the crowning apex point of the master's study, and it's always the thing that the students most enjoy, because then you get to choose your own topic that you want to study really in depth, using all of these skills that we've built up across this period of master study, so that you can then go off and engage in this independent study alongside a supervisor who's a specialist in that area. So that's just to give you a very broad view of the 4 degree schemes, the components of them, and give you an example of some of the modules that you might be able to study should you either study with us, or should you be studying with us in the next few years. And just a note to say, you can study these degree schemes full time, but you can also study them part time, and we have part-time structured and unstructured options. So you can do as little as 1 module each semester if you wish to take a slightly longer period of time to undertake your master's. So I think one of the benefits of the kind of masters we offer is that it is very flexible in terms of when you study and how you study. Because we have students from all around the world, we have to make sure that it's possible for everyone who's coming in from all these different time zones to study. So we're very flexible in terms of the kind of education we're offering, and many of our students study part-time in order to fit around other commitments. And we're very, very used to working with students to fit around those part-time commitments. So if you have any concerns about how you might study or the way in which you would like to study, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us, and we'll try and have a chat about how we might work with you to arrange something that works best for you. We really are a very supportive department, or we pride ourselves on being a very supportive centre, and it's absolutely, our key goal is to make sure that you are as supported in your studies as possible. So please do not hesitate to get in touch with us at any point if you have any queries, or if you'd like to know something about the possible study options that we have. Okay. So now we've got all the technical sort of aspects out of the way, I'd like to invite some of my colleagues to say hello, so that you can get to know some of the other historians who are at the Centre for History. So if I can invite, let me just have a look at who we have, so we all don't speak at once. So I'll call out people to introduce themselves and maybe say a little bit about the kind of courses they might offer at master's level. So Alison Chand, do you want to unmute and say something? Oh, our first technical difficulty. I, oh,
there we go.
We go.
There we go. I'm in if with a strange text box on my webcam, but that won't usually be there. I'm not sure why that's there. Anyway, hello everyone. I'm Alison Chand, and I'm a lecturer of the Centre for History. I've worked with the Centre for History since 2017. My main research area, I'm primarily an oral historian, and my own research has spanned from the reserved occupations in the Second World War to recently, over the last few years, looking at experiences of the COVID-19 pandemic. So quite wide-ranging areas of research, and I also work freelance as an oral historian in various different academic and community projects, and work as a trainer with the British Library and Oral History Society. So the main postgraduate module that I teach on with the Centre for History is Voices from the Past, Understanding and Using Oral History, which is about kind of introducing you to oral history and what it is and how to start going about it, how to use the methodology in your research, and why it's a relevant and valid methodology for historians. Yes, that module runs as part of the postgraduate courses, and would be my main involvement with you. That's all from me, I think.
Thank you, Alison. And one of the wonderful things about the courses that Alison run, as you say there, you're learning from someone who is not only, you know, teaching you about oral history, but is a practitioner of oral history themselves, and trains other people in oral history. So you'll be able to learn from Alison's vast experience in this area, which is we're so lucky to have. Ian Robertson, can I introduce you now?
Hello, everybody. Oh, now my camera seems to be operating. So, right, here I am in the full reflective glory of a gloomy Thursday afternoon. Right, so I'm Ian Robertson. I am an associate professor in historical geography here at the Centre for History. As a historian, though, everything I do, everything I research, I would say is based on the principles of history from below. What does that mean? Well, what it means is that I'm interested in the voices of the voiceless, the history of the defeated and the dispossessed, their stories, their memories, and indeed their responses to their oppression and dispossession. In the research I do, then I guess this manifests in an interest in the social and cultural history of the Highlands and Islands across the 20th century. And I think of the way in which that history also manifests in itself in a sense of cultural heritage. But in everything I do, very much like Alison, nearly everything is based in part, at least, on oral work, on oral history. And I too teach on the module Voices from the Past that Alison has just mentioned, one of our research training modules. And as Alison mentioned, but it's definitely worth repeating, half the module is about technique. It's about principles, and then the other half studies the place of oral history in the wider history discipline, shall we say. And also, though, most importantly, I think the way in which oral history can and is deployed in the real world, in the study and in what we might call, what we do call in the Centre for History, public history, which I would say is one of our strengths indeed, and also one of our unique things we offer the world. So that's me.
Thank you, Ian. And again, just really emphasising there the speciality we have in public history, and particularly in oral history, within the Highlands and Islands as well. And just going back to sort of what David said, we have lots and lots of opportunities, many of which have been created by Ian, to participate in the research that we as staff in the Centre for History are doing. So that's a real sort of, you know, we have a real emphasis on you guys getting really involved in our research, and I think that's a really lovely thing that you can then put on your CV when you go out to try, you know, applying for jobs, or maybe in a job you're in already in terms of your own personal development. There's lots and lots of different opportunities there, as Ian was saying. After I've finished introducing everyone, so I will get to those questions in a second. Thank you. So next we will Nicola.
Hi everyone, so I'm Nicola Martin, and it's lovely. I noticed quite a few familiar names in the chat, so it's lovely to see quite a few of our current undergraduate students have come along today to hear about the master's programmes. So I am a transatlantic historian, and 18th century British imperialism and Jacobitism are kind of my areas of specialism. So what I tend to do is look a lot at the British Army and what they're doing in Scotland and what they're doing in North America, in particular in the period around from the Battle of Culloden, so from the aftermath of the Jacobite uprising in 1745 up to the start of the American Revolution. I look at the British Army's interactions with different peoples, particularly peoples who are classed as other, so Scottish Highlanders, Indigenous groups, French Canadians as well, post conquest of Quebec, and I look at how experiences and interactions in Scotland inform the army as they go about sort of implementing empire in North America. So that's really the sort of bones of my research. I also do a lot in terms of Jacobitism, and that's my sort of biggest involvement with the postgraduate programmes at UHI. So I teach on the Royal Power module that Louisa's already mentioned, and I have a week on the Stuarts in exile on that module, which is always quite exciting because they're quite a different type of monarch because of the fact that they are in exile. So they're attempting to project their power, although they don't have an actual throne to sort of protect, and they're looking to regain that throne. I also do a little bit of teaching sometimes on arguments and alternatives, which is an exciting module and an important module, I think, for starting off the degree in terms of those kind of foundational skills that Louisa's mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. And lastly, I'll bring in Lucy.
Hello, thank you very much. It's lovely to see so many people here. I'm Dr. Lucy Dean, and my main module has been mentioned a few times, so I'll come back to that in a second. I'm a medieval and early modern scholar who looks largely at Scotland, but also Scotland's place in the wider world, particularly the Northern European world, and how it compares and contrasts and interacts with Northern Europe. I'm particularly interested in ceremony and ritual, and that's an area that I've done a lot of research to this point. I also do a lot of work with material culture methodologies and approaches to history through utilising sources beyond documents that perhaps some historians are a little bit tentative about grasping with both hands, but I really enjoy exploring those, particularly with master's students who really who sometimes they've been introduced to it for the first time, sometimes they're bringing those skills from their undergraduate. It's really nice to see how people engage with them in different ways at a different sort of theoretical level, which is always very exciting. I'm also a historian. I'm not quite as much of a theory geek as Louisa and Jim, I don't think, but I do like to draw on different theories to see how we can look at the medieval and early modern past, perhaps in ways that people haven't done before. And key area of research that I'm working on at the moment is to do with masculinities and how we might look at comparative analysis of elite men in Scotland through their gendered identity and what that gendered identity might have meant, and also what it meant to be of different ages in the past, and sort of that idea of the life cycle. The module that has been mentioned a couple of times already that you meet me most on in the master's programme is Royal Power, Propaganda and Performance, which is an early modern module that focuses on the way that monarchs, both in exile and in not in exile, are able to project their royal authority, but also the dialogue that has to exist with the people of those kingdoms for that kind of projection to have any kind of meaning or sense. And through that module you would look at a lot of beyond the document type of sources. We include architecture and material culture and all sorts of things that brings those sorts of skills to the fore, and there's quite a lot of built-in skills training in that module to assist those people who perhaps haven't come across those types of sources before. So I look forward hopefully to meeting more of you that I don't already know, because it was really nice to see so many names of people that I do, if you are joining the programme with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucy. And I should finally say, in terms of my own research, I take us even further back. So I'm part of the medieval contingent. I think I'm probably one of the, I think I might be the earliest in time period, if not, you know, alongside others, in terms of that my research goes back to about 1050, if not slightly before. And I am a historian of Scandinavia, Iceland, the Baltic region, and the British Isles. So I'm a comparative historian. I'm interested in behaviour. I'm interested in how culture changes how we behave over time. I'm interested in the norms, the cultural norms, which affect the way we behave towards one another. And the context in which I'm particularly interested in that is that of elite culture. So what informs how kings behave, what informs how elite men behave at court, how they relate to the to women, very much in line with what Lucy has been looking at in terms of masculinities and gender and how that affects relationships between individuals. But I'm also particularly interested in this comparative form of history. So how can we use comparative history to gain a different perspective on the sources that we look at? I always tell people I think the best sources, although I think, you know, in reality all my colleagues have excellent sources, but I will always stand up for the sagas. I have the sagas. If you study with me, you get sagas, and that's all the lovely Icelandic stories of, we have ghosts, we have trolls, we have all sorts of things. So you know, that's the benefit of studying Scandinavia with me. I will turn to the questions quickly, but I will ask our current and former student to get ready to turn their cameras on, if that's okay, for the Q&A section while I answer the questions. So I'll just give you a few minutes to get ready while I answer these questions. I will leave. I can see that David has put some information on entry requirements and on fees in the chat. If those if that doesn't answer your question, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. You can go onto the history, the Centre for History website and email us directly. And if you're a current student, you can email one of us directly, yourself or Alison in the office. So that's that. What I would say so does it matter if your undergraduate degree is in archaeology but you want to do a history master's? Absolutely not. So that was, I'm really glad you mentioned that. That's an excellent question. Historians at master's level come from all sorts of different backgrounds, all sorts of different disciplines. So please don't worry if you're coming from an aligned discipline, then that's absolutely fine. And if you're concerned about perhaps the you know, the gap of time between when you studied your undergraduate. Maybe you studied your undergraduate a little time ago and now you're thinking of returning to study. We're very, very used to people returning to study with us. So that's something we're very used to helping with and supporting. So absolutely, please just get in touch with us if you're at all concerned, and we'll walk you through that process. But yes, absolutely, archaeology into a histories masters, no problem at all. You'll bring loads of really wonderful skills that you will be able to use in the history masters. So it will be, you know, it will be a strength in terms of you'll have that added materiality to the evidence that you can use. So that's wonderful. Thank you very much for your question. For the MLit history course, yes, if you're interested in something like early modern European history, the modules, we normally offer a range of modules that you'll be able to study across all kinds of different topics. So as Lucy just said, you know, her royal power module is very focused on the early modern period, for example, and my colleagues module on Renaissance Venice is very focused on the early modern period. So there's lots of different things at different time periods that you'll be able to choose from in terms of the option modules. When you're thinking about the research training modules, so things like primary sources in history or arguments and alternatives, then absolutely in the assessments you'll be able to focus in using examples from periods of history that you're particularly interested in. So you'll be able to demonstrate those skills, but through the topics that you're interested in. So absolutely, there'll be a level of flexibility, particularly in those core subjects, and then in the optional subjects, they're very broad in terms of different kinds of options you'll have to study. What's the overall program demographic? Gosh, well, as David said at the beginning, we are so fortunate because we have just the most wonderfully diverse group of people studying our modules. So yes, as you say, one of your friends was 40 when she took her course here. Absolutely. We have people who've just finished their undergraduate degrees, or, you know, people who finished their undergraduate degree 25 years ago and are returning to study. So as I say, you know, age is not, you know, not a barrier. There will be lots and lots of people of different you know, of different ages, different genders, from all across different parts of the world. And that's one of the wonderful things I get to meet as a lecturer, all these people from places that I've perhaps never visited, and find out more about them and their lives. So we have a wonderfully diverse group of people that you'll be able to meet and get in touch with. Okay. I'll leave the question on the 2-1 because we've put entrance requirements there. Can I call on our students now? So we've got, thank you. We've got Alexander Ryland and Teresa Mackey, who have been so generous to join us. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to start by opening up a question to you. We'll start with Teresa. Teresa, why did you decide to attend UHI?
That's a very good question. Can you hear me okay? I just want to check. Okay, because I am dialing in from the west coast of Canada. There's a large island, for those of you who haven't been here, called Vancouver Island, and I live in Victoria. So it's about, I don't know, 20 to 9 in the morning. And so the reason why I decided to join UHI really came from my dad. He was very sick at the time, and he said to me, you know, life is short, do what you love, follow your heart. And I took a heart-centered approach to my future and went, well, if I'm going to do something that I really love, it's Scottish history for sure. And that's why I started to explore the idea of where to go. And I was living in Victoria at the time, living on the west coast of Canada, and I had done my undergrad at Simon Fraser University 100 years ago, so didn't want to go back there, just wanted to try something new. So my options in Canada, my one main option really was another university in central Canada, Guelph. But I couldn't move my family. So I was in my late 40s and I couldn't move my family. My husband had a career here. My kids were in school here. We had a house here. And so I needed something that was super flexible. And I found Dr. Elizabeth Ritchie So she did her PhD at Guelph. And I thought, oh, there's a nice Canadian connection there. And so I reached out to her and then David, and we just started talking, and I realized how flexible the program was, and it really worked for me and my family. I could stay in Victoria, I could continue with my career job at the time, and I could study. So that really worked for me, and it was a huge bonus that Dr. Ritchie went to Guelph because I felt she had a bit of a Canadian perspective, which was great. And the university was in Scotland, and I felt that was really important, and especially that it was in the Highlands and Islands. And that was originally where my grandfather and previous ancestors were from. They're from Glenlivet and Black Isle, so it just made all sense to me.
Thank you very much, Teresa. And it's, I always think it's wonderful how many students have that connection to Scotland, and that draws them to the Highlands and Islands. So that's a really wonderful story, and just explains, I think, hopefully reassures anyone who's thinking, gosh, I don't know if I can quite fit this around work and family, and actually there's quite a lot of flexibility there with our programs. So the same question to you, Alexander. Why did you decide to come to UHI?
My reasons are going to be very, very different to Teresa's, but there is a common theme around the flexibility, actually. So I graduated, this feels like a long time ago, but it's not. I graduated in 2012 from Aberdeen in politics and international relations, so not a historian at all. And I retrained in 2019 as a history teacher. So I'm back to Aberdeen, did my education degree, and then got sent home because there was a pandemic, which was great. But I've been teaching in secondary schools in Aberdeenshire ever since, and it had occurred to me that as somebody who is teaching history, having a history degree might be a good idea. And I'd wanted to do postgraduate study anyway, and I'd been doing some additional undergraduate modules kind of one by one with UHI because they were available by distance learning while I was working for my history teaching, because you have to have so many university level modules to qualify in different subjects. So I'm qualified in 2 subjects, and history was my extra one. And I was encouraged very much by Dr. Dean to continue studying and to study at a higher level than what I think, to be honest, at the time, having a bit of a crisis of confidence in myself, felt was an appropriate level. I thought I can do the undergraduate ones, that's all right. But actually I have 2 degrees, why not do a master's degree? So that's what I did. And I came into it through UHI rather than, I live in Aberdeen. Aberdeen's my alma mater for my undergraduate. But UHI offered the flexibility because I work. And although I work part-time, so I do have some extra time to study, being able to do things by distance learning, being able to do it online in my own time is an awful lot easier, particularly as a teacher where my days are very fixed. So if there's a lecture that comes up on a day that I work, I wouldn't have been able to go to it. And the way that UHI teaches is designed to accommodate for that. So in the same way that it's 9 o'clock in the morning for Teresa, that doesn't particularly matter because that it's kind of 5 o'clock here, because the teaching is done asynchronously. And that was quite important to me, to be able to just work in my own time when I could, how I wanted to, but still be able to interact with the cohort and with the teaching staff to participate actively in the course, but in my own way. I think that's why you've got quite a diverse group of people on the course. It isn't just one particular kind of age group or demographic. It's as David has pointed out in the chat, people from initial undergraduates through to retirees, and you do notice that people share a bit about their interests and their backgrounds when they're talking about their learning on the discussion boards for each module. And that gives a lot of different insights into the way that you're learning, which I think is quite useful to see how other people interpret the same information based on their life experiences as well as their academic knowledge, which can be quite eye-opening.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And if I may, Teresa, if we just follow on from that in terms of the ways in which we teach at UHI, could you explain, could you sort of tell us a little bit about your experience of how you found studying with us, the kind of ways in which you were able to study and fit that around other responsibilities you might have had?
Mm-hmm. I think it really helps if you're a bit self-motivated, and I think that self-motivation comes from interests in the course, and which, you know, if you apply, you're going to have. So there's a really interesting way of, or an interesting moment where you start the course and you go, okay, how am I going to fit all of this in? And but I think you do. I think what Alexander was talking about in terms of fitting in it at the end of the day, fitting it in when you've got free time. What I did personally is I can remember always dedicating one day on the weekend completely to studying. This is just for me. This worked for me. It might be different for other people, but I had one day a week on the weekends where I dedicated completely to studying. I would do other things like discussion board engagement and readings and things during the week when I had time. And I had a partner that was super supportive. So he was very willing to wash dishes and do cooking and, you know, manage the household and manage the kids and everything when I had to do work. But I think that's what is the joy in this program, is that you can do that. You can manage all of that. And I think, you know, we learned a lot from each other as well. David talked earlier about Graham Hanford, and I went to school with Graham doing the MLit history of the Highlands and Islands. And we learned a lot from each other within the cohort. And I think that was so amazing too. There was questions, I think, on the chat here and the question earlier about demographics and how the variety you know, and I think that's what is also a major benefit to the course too, is that you are exposed to a variety of different ages and backgrounds, and some people had no Scottish history, other people had tons of Scottish history. So that's what made it exciting, and we all learned from each other.
Yeah, thank you. That's really wonderful to hear, and I'm so pleased that was your experience. So, just to I think just describe a little bit more this idea of asynchronous learning. So there is no, you don't need to be, or you know, be available at any particular time for a class. There may be meetings and classes, and we'll try and, you know, set those for as many people to come as possible, but we will never assume that you'll be available at one particular time. So it's very, very flexible, and we have online learning platforms. Materials are available digitally, lots of ebooks, lots of journal articles. So you'll be able to have access to the same materials as you would perhaps in an in-person course, but be able to do this very much in a flexible way. So you might, as Teresa did, pick a day that you might work, or work in the evenings, or however you wish to structure that. And that's also something we can support with and help you with. Alexander, I'd love to hear a bit about what your favorite module, or maybe a module that was really memorable, that you learned. So, you know, or something that really sparked a real interest during your course.
Okay. So my favorite module was absolutely the raw power performance and propaganda course that Lucy Dean runs, and that's probably had the most influence on my academic thinking. It was also the first course I took, so we kind of got that out of the way early. And there was a point earlier on in the chat about how much can you put your academic interests into the different courses that you're studying. And actually that's been interesting to try, because having taken that course and found that actually the study of early modern kingship was something I was particularly interested in, having never thought about before, I'll be honest, I turned up thinking, oh, I'm going to study the 20th century. I might do the 19th. I think my first dissertation discussion, I mentioned to a friend, I might write about the Foreign Office in the 18th century and be a political historian. And I'm currently writing about gendered attitudes towards kingship in the 17th century, which is absolutely not even close. But since then, other courses that I have done, whilst they've kind of expanded out that learning into different areas, I've been able to find ways of putting my interest into them. So, for example, David has an interesting course on ports and coasts in European history. A lot of the sources, interestingly, are from Dornoch around the kind of 18th, 19th century. I wrote about London and Amsterdam in the 16th century for my essay, because there's optionality in what you can do for assessments. So I was able to take the learning from the course and use that kind of transferable knowledge to apply it to my own area of interest and research, which I think is valuable to do. And as a master's student, I think that's probably one of the important differences that you'll get with undergraduate. There's a question just there now about how much more difficult is it? And postgraduate learning is more challenging than undergraduate learning. That it should be, because it's postgraduate, but it's also more independent, and it encourages you to think for yourself and to do your own research. So whilst it's taught, but with flexibility for you to find stuff out and kind of explore your own areas of interest, which I think is useful. But for me, very much it was the kingship course that I liked. Not because it was about traditional rulers and kind of the sort of staid history of here's king number one and then king number two and king number three and look at all these powerful men with crowns, but rather let's analyze why they're important and how society is structured around it. And the work I'm doing right now is around how patriarchy keeps people in power and how power is held to patriarchal standards and what that means. So I'm studying a lot of gender theory within it, which is totally not where I thought I would be, but it's really interesting.
That's really wonderful to hear, and I always think it's very exciting when students come in and I say, you know, what period of history you're interested in, and they say, you know, Second World War or Tudors or whatever it is, and I'm thinking, I say to them, yes, but keep an open mind, because by the end of this year you may well find yourself in doing something you've never thought of before. And I think that's the wonder of exploring history at this level, that you will come across subjects you've never thought about studying before and then get the opportunity to study them really in depth. And as Alexander said, in terms of the step up to master's level, it's really about gaining your independence as a researcher, which is why those, you know, the core modules we do and then the option modules are so important, because it's about giving you those skills so that you can go off and do a project on whatever period of history you're passionate about. And hopefully you become more of an expert in it than we are, and then we learn from you, which is just the most wonderful thing. So it would be, you know, brilliant to see what some of you come up with should you come to study with us, or if you're coming to study with us, I really look forward to reading your master's dissertations. I always think it's always wonderful when we get those in. We're coming to the end of the discussion, which is unfortunately, because I would love to hear more about your experiences, but I think we'll finish with this question, and we'll go to Teresa first. What would you tell someone who's thinking of coming to study at UHI?
I would say do it, 100% do it. And at the same time, I would say fend off those people who say to you, well, what are you going to do with that? I had so many people say to me, well, what are you going to do with that? Especially because I was in my late 40s when I started. So it was, you know, what are you going to do? In other words, what is going to be the capital return on that? And I can tell you now, I've had every job and every opportunity come to me as a result of my connection with UHI. In some way, there's a pathway back to that MLit degree. So, you know, go with your heart, go with what you're passionate about. If you love this stuff, if you find yourself on the weekend reading Scottish history books or archaeology books or public history books or anything like that, you're well set for doing this degree. So I'd really encourage it.
Thank you so much, Teresa. That's wonderful. Yes, I think, you know, if you're passionate about something, you're on a really good position to start with. That's really going to carry you through. And Alexander, what would you?
I think that. Sorry, I've completely lost my use of English language here. I think that I would encourage people to not come into a course to come into a course with interests, but not to come into it closed-minded, because I think one of the great benefits of the different expertise in the department and of the different courses on offer and of the independence that you have as a postgraduate compared to an undergraduate is that you can discover new interests, and that you can find them where you don't expect to. So don't feel that what you think you're going to do at the start is what you're going to come out of it doing. I did this just because I could, because doing a postgraduate degree sounded interesting, and because I was encouraged to. And like Teresa, that question of what you're going to do with this, well, I could become a history teacher, but unfortunately I already am one. So what do I do with it? I'm off to do some postgraduate research, so I'm starting my PhD in September. That's not for everybody, but it's certainly a pathway that, again, when I started, I didn't expect to be doing doctoral research. So don't feel like you have to have an end goal, because sometimes learning's good for learning's sake, and the more open you are about that, the more that you're likely to learn.
Thank you very much for that. And I can say we could not have two better representatives for our Centre for History. So thank you so much for taking the time to come and speak to our students and potentially future students today. We will end the event there. However, if you do have any other questions, I will stay on the line to answer any of those that might come up. But I think if we end the recording, then I'll open up to anyone who would like to ask any questions. And if there aren't any questions, then please do feel free to enjoy your evenings.